Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May peace be upon all of you. Welcome. Good evening. We're so excited to have you for the fourth and final installment of Muslim Aid USA's Muslim Global Campaign to end domestic violence. And we are here to raise awareness all for the month of October about domestic violence. Now, I want to first start off with some definitions and also introduce myself. So I'm Yasmin. My name is Yas Guru on Instagram, and I'm a lawyer and a comedian and a relationship expert. And I am really excited to be partnering with Muslim Aid USA on making sure that we really amplify the voices of people who are survivors of domestic violence, as well as those who help them. And so today is going to be a fantastic lineup of people who assist individuals who are victims and then survivors of domestic violence. Domestic violence is about power and control and domination, and it comes in many forms. It's not just physical. It can be mental, emotional, spiritual, sexual, financial. And it's when somebody in an intimate partner setting or in a family setting seeks to control a situation and dominate someone else through either the use of violence or the threat of violence or manipulation. And so I want to introduce our speakers today kind of from the lens of thinking about what is a healthy relationship. How does a healthy relationship look like? What does a healthy marriage look like? Because we wanted to end these web series on a happy note, and one about rebuilding and restructuring your life after you've been shattered from domestic violence. And I want you guys to see at the very bottom, LaunchGoodcom/DV. We've raised almost $80,000. The goal is to hit 100,000 or to surpass it. That would be great. Please do think about giving generously. And inshallah, we will be talking a lot more about what these programs are for. There's a domestic program and a global international program as well. The domestic program is in New York, part of Pillars of Peace within ICNY. And we have our international program as well in Somalia to help at the hospital level for first responders, for individuals who really need to seek the safety and the security of those who are helping survivors of domestic violence. I want to also just remind you of the grave statistic that's involved. 1 out of every 3 women will experience domestic violence at some point in their life. That's an astonishing rate. One third of the female population. So today is about making sure that we're looking for the good signs, looking for good, healthy partners, so that inshallah we can avoid that statistic. Unfortunately, the Muslim community is not an exception to this. So we really want to combat that. I want to introduce my first speaker tonight is going to be Salma Elkadi Abugideiri. She is a founding board member of the Peaceful Families Project, an organization dedicated to educating the Muslim community about domestic violence. And Sister Salma has provided educational workshops. She developed resources related to mental health issues and domestic violence among Muslims, as well as workshops on healthy relationships. So excited to have you here. I also have a personal woman crush on you. I just want to share that. I model myself after you. I love you so much. I have 2 boys. Let's just put it out there. Thank you for joining us, Sister Salma.
Thank you so much for having me as part of this program. I'm really excited to be with you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is going to be Imam Mohamed Magid, the illustrious executive Imam of the Al-Dulles Muslim Society, or Adams Center in Sterling, Virginia. He is the chairman of the International Interfaith Peace Corps, IIPC, and the former president of the Islamic Society of North America, ISNA. Welcome, Imam Magid.
Thank you, Yasmin. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Somebody who is important not to us just domestically, but internationally as well. And then our final speaker, inshallah, will be Sister Berak Hussain. How are you? And Sister Berak Hussain is an Iraqi-Canadian registered psychotherapist practicing in Canada for the past 13 years. She's known as the Muslim counselor. You can catch her on Instagram. And she's a passionate public speaker about Muslim mental health, social justice, domestic violence, women's issues, Islamic issues, and even poetry. A woman of very many talents. Hello and welcome, Berak. We're so excited to have you.
Thank you. An honor.
So I want to just first kick it off by saying, there's lots of people that want to dig into this subject. We know the divorce statistics are about half of marriages end in divorce. And that is not something that's novel just to, non-Muslims. It's also happening in the Muslim community. We really want to know how we can try to avoid, our homes being broken. We want our homes to be healthy and protected under the light and the beauty of our religion and the teachings of our religion. So I want to just first start off by asking you, Berak, what are some of the things that I think people should be looking for instead of necessarily starting with the red flags? Can we start with the green flags? What are the things that someone should be looking for in a partner to help protect them maybe from being this as part of the statistic, either of divorce or, of course, domestic violence?
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على نبينا محمد وآل محمد وأصحابه المنتجبين. This is a really good way of starting it with the positive, especially when we talk about positive psychology and putting positive vibes out there. And we want to look at the light, so to speak. And I think it doesn't start with when you get married. It has to start before you get married, right? A lot of people get excited about the wedding and what the plans are going to be for the honeymoon and what's going to happen in the future. But I think people don't plan properly ahead of time because they're so caught up in falling in lust with each other as opposed to learning about what it is to truly love the other person. So when we look at it from a spiritual Islamic perspective with psychology, you are looking at somebody who's going to help you complete half your faith, as we know from the ayah of the Quran. Of course, there's going to be so many different interpretations to that other than the official interpretation of what that means. But essentially, when you are going to get married to somebody in terms of the green lights, from this perspective, and I know not everybody's going to have the spiritual, the religious component in their lives, but essentially, when we are talking about Muslims, this is our code of conduct right here in terms of green light. Are you going to be with somebody who respects the Quran and the Sunnah, the traditions that we are taught to be able to apply that in your marriage, right?
Absolutely.
So I always look at it from that angle. You're going to marry somebody in terms of the green light. Are they truly going to be following that? Of course, we don't know until you actually are living with this person what it's going to be like, because in the beginning, we're all going to show our best side. And this is normal and natural from a psychological perspective, that when we meet people, we're going to show our best sides to them. The green lights, again, is when everything is consistent, right? When things make sense, they fall into place. A lot of people talk about, well, this doesn't make sense, or I felt something off about that, or et cetera, et cetera. So I would say things fall into place. They make sense. You have support from both families. Things are not fishy. Things are not off that way. This is just surface level. The iceberg example metaphor that we always use. The tip of the iceberg. These are the tip of the iceberg type of things. But then you've got underneath the layer of that water, all of these other aspects that in time will allow you to see all of these things, because it's just lip service in the beginning. If you truly think about it, what we present each other our best to the other person, because we're in that wooing stage. We're in that trying to get them to like us, to fall in love with us. And it's so easy to fall in love with somebody when they show the right aspects of themselves, that they're religious, they help, charity, they take care of their family. And I guess being a psychotherapist for 13 years now and seeing so many unfortunate situations, I guess I tend to focus more on the the red.
Okay.
Rather than the green.
Yeah.
Just quickly wrap up this point, because it's so hard to see the green as it truly is the right person and the right signs, because it's only when you live with the person that you can really, really get to know them, because they can show you so much goodness for so long, but until you actually live with them, then you start picking up on these things. So maybe the tip of the iceberg example is a good way to start before we delve deeper into the green and the red.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because I think that that's one of the major concerns. I think people who are wanting to respect Islamic codes of conduct when it comes to relationships, not living together before marriage, not having basically a relationship at that level until after marriage. So it's kind of hard. What we're looking for is what are the things that we can see at the tip of that iceberg? What are the important things? And you mentioned, respecting the religion. You mentioned giving charity. You mentioned being good to someone's family. You mentioned consistency. And I wanted to ask you, Sister Salma, when we talk about, for example, consistency in someone's speech and in someone's actions, what do you find is another way that we can test consistency when we're getting to know someone, and if we haven't, obviously, shared living quarters with them?
I mean, I think it can be really helpful to see people in different contexts and in different relationships. So sometimes it could be like during the courting phase, you are showing that particular person your best self, and you might be, really appear to be very interested in the person and respectful and funny and maybe generous, all kinds of things. And how are you talking about other people? Are you talking about others in a respectful way? Are you displaying like good character across the board, or only with the person that you're trying to, woo or court? So that's one way to see consistency. Another way is, there are people who may try to impress by quoting Quran and Hadith, show a lot of Islamic knowledge. Are they living it? Like, what are they treating you in a way that feels respectful, that feels good? Or are they just, quoting Hadith and Quran and using it maybe even against you, right? Like to make you conform, but they're not necessarily living it. So there shouldn't be double standards. And then I think like over time, you can tell if a person is consistent. Like if you're able to interact with them over time in different contexts with different people, in different kinds of settings, you begin to see. I
think that's totally right. Especially when you see them around their family members and you see them around their friends they've had for a really long time. I think a lot of times the guard that they have up sometimes comes down, and you see glimpses of how they really are when they're around those people. So I think that's really good advice. Changing up the context and seeing how they talk about other people, that's really important, because if they talk condescendingly about someone or they speak respectfully about someone, that is going to be eventually you, because they're right, because they're not going to show you all of the things about how they're going to talk about you right in front of you, right? Nobody does that. But it's like when they get comfortable, how do they talk about people, or how do they treat people? Imam Magid, when you have people come to you, because I know that you do some premarital counseling within the Adams Center, and people come to you and they're really excited about getting married, and you're doing some pre-counseling with them. What are some of the green lights that you see? What are some of the great things that you see in two people's dynamic that makes you think, wow, these two are going to be successful بإذن الله تعالى?
بسم الله والصلاة على رسول الله. I think number one is the realistic expectation.
Yeah.
I tell people, whatever you see is what you get. Don't assume that they're going to change somebody after you get married.
Yeah, that's right.
Because you're going to marry someone from a different culture, and you are accepting that person with a different culture, and you want to celebrate their culture with them. That's a green light or green sign.
Yes.
The other thing is that the healthy relationship they have with their siblings.
Yes.
Especially female siblings.
Yes.
How they treating their sisters.
Yes.
And then when I ask them, tell me a little bit about your relationship with your sisters, how family, and then you ask the person who is in a relationship or your fiance to say, have you, how he's treating his sisters. What do you think about their relationship? Then the other thing is that if they are not rushing it, they are not just drive-through marriages.
Right.
Parking lot marriage. Like, oh, we're in the parking lot. Can you get us married? Because we just put the.
I love that. That's what the Imam calls it. That's right. That's a masjid parking lot marriage. That's
right.
They
did it with me, like 9-1 marriage. Like right now, it's urgent, just tonight. They're rushing it. They're not rushing it, and they take their time, and then that's a good sign.
That's really beautiful. That's incredible insight. And for those of you who are watching, there's over 460 viewers right now, and we keep building viewers. I just want you guys to know that one of the great ways to prepare yourself for marriage is to be able to have a very strong spiritual connection to God and to ask God for what you want. Be very specific about what you want. And one of the ways that we know in our faith that we can ask is after we give in charity. You can see here, LaunchGood.com/DV is such an easy way to donate to this Muslim global campaign to end domestic violence. And for you to make dua when you do that for a healthy relationship. Make dua for the people who are suffering and need to come out of that difficulty. Make dua. But what's so beautiful about your prayer when you give is that you're putting it in action. You really are giving hope to someone who wants to rebuild their life, who wants to be in a healthy relationship so desperately, who needs the legal support, who needs this psychosocial support to be able to get themselves back on track. And that's exactly what Muslim Aid USA is trying to do. And we really hope that you can all give even something small is very weighty, is very, very weighty, and can really help transform someone's life. And make dua. Make dua while you do it, and be very intentional about the give. I kind of want to shift now to something that you talked about, Salma, about kind of taking your time, and of course, Imam Magid mentioned this, taking your time. Do you have in your mind kind of like a timeline of how long someone should get to know somebody before walking down the aisle, walking to the masjid, and writing that kitab?
You know, I wish there was some kind of formula that you could just say, if you get to know each other X amount of time, you're good. I wish it was like that. It would make life so much easier, but it's not. It really just depends. It depends on so many factors. You know, I see some people that they may not know each other for a long time, maybe just a couple of months, but during that time, they're working really hard to get to know each other. They're going through like premarital questionnaire and premarital counseling. They have enough time to see each other in different contexts. Maybe their families have known each other, or they have friends in common. So they get to know each other through various channels. Mm-hmm. Whereas other people, you know, they may know nothing about each other. They come from completely different communities. They don't even have friends in common, or, you know, other people in common. So they may need longer because they don't have multiple sources of information, you know, where they can get to know the person. So there really isn't, I don't think there's a certain amount of time, but I do think that there's a certain amount of territory you have to cover so that you've really explored, you know, your common goals, your vision for marriage, your expectations. Do your personalities clash? Can you get along? You know, just learning your, maybe, you know, important things about your respective families of origin that might be challenging or might make things easier. So you need to cover the territory. I don't have a minimum or a maximum. I've been shocked sometimes to find people have known each other just for a very brief amount of time, like a few weeks. They have great marriages, and other people have been in a relationship for years and before they get married, and it's terrible because they didn't do the work. So it's not, you know, and maybe others can chime in.
Yeah, I would love to ask your opinion, Berak, about this, and about, you know, are there timelines that you give your clients? I know that just for me, when I just used to matchmake, I don't matchmake anymore, I'm retired, but I used to always talk to people like, no less than 3 months, guys. Like I had a bare minimum, like no one's allowed to go get married before 3 months. And I find that was because people really developed an emotional connection at that around that time. They either missed that person or didn't. They either wanted to get their input on their life or did not. And, you know, they wanted to talk seriously or not. People, you know, would introduce, you know, the whole idea of families coming together. So Berak, have you found that there is a timeline that you like to give your clients?
I'm a tough counselor, meaning I'm very direct. Meaning if somebody comes to me and said, you know, I've met someone and we're doing the Ketz Tab, and they've only met a week, they're going to hear it. They're going to hear it from me. And it's exactly what you said. As human beings, we have a natural tendency that when we spend time with somebody, when we hear flowery, beautiful, flirtatious words, our hearts are wild. Right? They're called qalb because of the inqilab. They turn, right? So you flip, your heart flips and gets attached, like you said. And so within a short period of time, it's very natural to, when you have a routine with someone, when you connect with them, when you go out with them, when you talk with them, when you meet with the family, when you do all these things, you get attached.
Right.
The more time you have with that person, of course, that can really impact it. Now, I'm going to show some resources that I use in my office at the university, but I also use with my Muslim clients. And we talk about it from the Muslim perspective, of course, because they're not authored by Muslims. But I find them to be classic. And I've used them with clients of different backgrounds. And I find that these really help when you are getting to know somebody. So it's not necessarily the amount of time, like what dear sister Salma said. You could connect with somebody and you could get married to someone within a short period of time, and you have other people who've known each other for so long. It doesn't work. And I find, so there's no specific formula like Sister Salma was saying, but it's a combination of factors. So it's the quality, not necessarily the time, and what you were doing in that research phase. So there's this book called The 5 Love Languages. I'm sure.
Yes, by Gary Chapman. Yes.
Exactly. This is a classic one that I highly recommend, that you get to learn your own love language. And so what that means is you have to understand what is important to you. Is it quality time? Is it words of affirmation? Is it gifts, acts of service, and physical touch? Once you know what type you are, then you can also figure out what the other person's type is. And this is something, as you were getting to know each other in the premarital stage and the premarital counseling stages, to really understand this about each other. This becomes very important after marriage, because then you understand the love language of what your partner needs and what your partner needs of yourself. Another classic, and forgive me, this is very pop culture, and I thought it was a joke until I picked up the book one day in my office, and then I went and bought the entire series because of how accurate I found it to be personally, but then with my own clients. And I would use this book across cultures, which is why I found it to be so effective. Are you ready? Do you want to take a guess at what book?
I'm ready. No, I can't guess.
Pop quiz.
We're live, Berak. Don't put me on the spot.
All right.
Pop culture. Oh, men are from Mars and women are from Venus. That's a classic.
It's a classic.
That's a classic.
The reason why I said, don't make fun of it at first, there's a pop culture, is because until you actually pick up the book and you read it, then you'll be like, oh, wow. Yeah. It is quite accurate, because what the author does, who has, I forget how many years of expertise in marriage counseling, he's a guru in this. And what he does is he looks at the basic things that I find are important in terms of when we talk about not necessarily length, but in terms of understanding of each other before you jump into marriage. And the things that he delves into, just quickly want to go through them because they're crucial, is understanding that although we're physically from the same planet, our mentalities do tend to be different because we are physiologically, and hormonally wired differently. So obviously we're going to have different responses. He looks at how the men are the Mr. Fix-It and the women are the Home Improvement Committee. Looks at how men go into their caves when they need to process information or issues or dilemmas, where women, what do we like to do usually? Talk about things. Let's talk about this. Which is probably the husband's dreaded words, unless you're a great communicator, and this is something we need to work on, right? So this is really great, how men pull into their cave and they're like rubber bands. They snap back when you give them that space. I'm just going to quickly run through this here. How to motivate the opposite gender, speaking different languages. So women, we tend to exaggerate. We say never, ever, always. These are words that have different context and meanings, and if we don't learn that about each other during that get to know phase, it can cause quite a bit of challenges later. Talks about how men are like rubber bands. They pull away when they need to go to their cave to process, and when you don't punish them, meaning with dirty looks or nagging or not giving them that space to process things the way they do, they come back like this, as like a rubber band. But if you don't give them that support when they need during that time period, they come back not as strong as an elastic band analogy he uses here. Talks about how women are like waves. We feel like we're on top of the world one day, and then the other day we feel at the bottom of the ocean, and how understanding that of each other and our diverse personalities can really help each other. This is my favorite chapter, where he looks at discovering our different emotional needs. And this is so crucial, because we think we know our partners until we actually delve into this a little bit deeper. And so if we think about it logically, in 1, 2, 3 weeks, are we going to really be able to understand this? Which is why, your formula of minimum 3 months, I think, is great to understand this about each other, right? How to avoid arguments, scoring points with the opposite gender, how to communicate difficult feelings. whether
Yes.
you're an extrovert or an introvert, whether you're male or female, it's going to be different. And this is actually a chapter that I use with clients all around, not just with marriage, because it is with friends, it is with family, it is with coworkers. So there's a lot of emotions involved. Finally, it takes a look at how to ask for support and get it from each other's different personalities and how we're wired differently, and how to keep the magic of love alive. So I've actually given this book and recommended it to all of my siblings before they got married.
Lovely.
And I think this is a great gift during the engagement period to give, to get to know each other from a psychological perspective, including the spiritual and the religious perspective, because again, that goal in mind during that time frame that you're getting to know somebody. Why are you getting married to this person? Because they're so hot, because they're so rich, because all of these superficial materialistic factors. Is it because of these reasons? Or is it you truly want to walk on this path in life towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with somebody who can make you reach your full potential, including all of this? 2 weeks is not going to cut it. You're going to need a lot more time to get to know somebody from these perspectives, including from our spiritual religious perspectives.
Yeah, thank you, Berak. That's very good, especially when you think about marriage not as the destination but as the means of launching yourself into your full potential, the means of launching yourself into the purpose that you're put onto this earth to do good and to remember God's glory and to glorify God's many blessings in your life, to enter a state of gratitude because you're with a partner who's really a partner for you in your life and sharing your life with you. And I want to know from your perspective, Imam Magid, when you see two people come in and it just seems like maybe they're either rushing it or maybe they're not, they haven't asked all the right questions. What are some of the red flags that you look for to put yourself on guard so that you can recommend for them, hey, pump the brakes, slow it down, or maybe this isn't a good fit?
When one of them says, I'm hoping this person will act differently with me when we get married. We have so much fights, we so much disagreement, but I really love him or I love her. That's a red flag. The other thing is that when the decision in marriage made by the guy mother,
an in-law is pushing.
Like there's no space from the beginning. Your wife has to wear this cloth during the wedding time. Anything that you need to make decision, even the furniture you're going to buy for your apartment, you have to get approved by me.
That's right.
Mother gotta choose the curtains.
Yeah, that's a red flag.
Yes.
And then when a person during even the premarital counseling, one of them look very dominating. That person is not saying anything, and whatever he says, whatever she says,
right?
That is not a good match. People think like, oh, that's alhamdulillah, like
happy wife, happy life. It's like
no, there's
partnership
aspect of this. You think that those people don't have a healthy way of communicating.
Right.
They are not understanding the reality of what's going to happen. You are worried about them managing conflict after they get married, because either they do avoidance, they don't like to confront each other, or appeaser, like, okay, whatever you say goes, but it doesn't go like that all the time.
Right.
That's a red flag. If a person come from a history of abusive relationship, and sometimes it's very awkward. They sit before you, and this man have committed domestic violence before. Maybe somebody went to the hospital because of them, but the man does not know that. It makes it uncomfortable, completely not comfortable. And sometimes I look for the sign of control.
Yes.
There that. I asked them questions about what do you think we should make a decision in the family. The man said the man make all the decisions. That's a red flag.
Yeah.
That's some of the aspect of it. I'm quite sure Salma and
Yes.
Berak more to add it.
Yeah, I want to hear definitely from all of you on this. Salma, I know you sit with lots of people. So if you could share the red flags from your professional experience, I think it would really benefit the viewers.
Yeah, subhanAllah. You know, one of the things that always strikes me, so I guess I should just maybe let the viewers know that I do a lot of marriage counseling, and generally people come to me when they're on the brink of like divorce. So it's already like, they're already pretty miserable. But when I ask people, like, when did you first know that there was a problem, especially if it's an abusive relationship? When did you first know? Many people say that they knew before they got married. They had a feeling, but they didn't trust their feeling. So one of the most important things is that we trust our intuition. We trust that inner wisdom that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given all of us. You know, sometimes there's so much pressure, you know, to get married, just to get married. Whether it's societal, your friends are all married and now it's your turn, whether it's family saying you're too old, whether cultural messaging. Sometimes people have brought someone to you and they've really, you know, hyped that person up, but you just have this feeling like this is not it may not be a bad person. Maybe it's just the feeling is that it's not the right person for me. Or it could be there's something that's, you know, I don't feel good when I'm around this person. So I think, you know, that's a really important thing. And I can't overemphasize that we have to trust. And if we're feeling that something is off, we can check it out with other people, because sometimes we feel something is off. It might be our own anxiety about getting married or our own fear of commitment.
Right.
But check it out with somebody, talk to people who know you well, talk to a professional if you need to. But that's a really important thing. The other thing is, if you notice that you're giving up who you are. So maybe all your life you wanted to be, I don't know, you wanted to be a doctor. And now, you know, you're met this person who all of a sudden now, not only you're not going to be a doctor, you're not even going to go to school at all. You find yourself giving up things that have been so important to you, your dreams. It could be anything.
Yes.
So when you can't be your full self, then I think that's a red flag. And then, you know, there are small things that sometimes people dismiss. They just say, well, this is something small. I should be patient. I should overlook flaws, even though it could be something that really, really rubs you the wrong way and may even like go against your values. You know, it could be that somebody is telling you who you should be friends with and who you shouldn't be friends with. Give me the password to your email accounts and all of your accounts. Right before marriage.
Huge sign.
Even after marriage, I don't necessarily think that's has to be done. You know, like you start to feel these ways in which your life is being controlled. And it may be small things, and other people may say, oh, that's not a big deal, but he's a good guy or she's a good, you know, whatever. If those things bother you, pause, put the brakes on, check it out with somebody, really listen to that internal wisdom. So those are two things. There's a lot of things. I mean, I could take a lot of time to everybody else.
That's sage advice. Thank you. And for you, Berak, and your, you know, many years of experience, what for you really stands out as a danger zone for red flag?
Everything that my respected elders have presented here, absolutely. When it comes to control, from the tiny little things to the big things, like in terms of dressing. Although I also have to put it out there, when it comes to dressing, perhaps the other partner has their best interest in terms of dressing more modestly or Islamically. Fair enough, but there's a fine line, of course, when it comes to control and abuse, who you can talk to, who you cannot talk to anymore. That can be tricky as well, especially if you have friends of the opposite gender. It can be seen as control, but then there's also the Islamic perspective as well. So I think that we have to be careful when it comes to those things, because sometimes the other person could say, well, they're so controlling, I'm not allowed to talk to my male friends anymore. So this begs the question, well, from a religious perspective, A, B, C. So these are things that I notice a lot with Muslims, and they may not be relevant to non-Muslims, but definitely with Muslims, I find this is something that needs to be ironed out beforehand. So red flags, in addition to what my respected elders had said, from a mental health perspective, is how they make you feel. If they're constantly putting you down, if they're lifting you up and dropping you down, you're perhaps dealing with somebody of a narcissistic nature or from a borderline personality or a different type of personality disorder where they don't feel good unless they make you feel bad, right?
Yeah.
And
they're like yo-yoing you. Yeah.
absolutely, they're playing with your emotions. So a red flag is if they don't make you feel good. They're constantly putting you down. The way that you speak, the way that you dress, your accomplishments, your studies, anything about you, whether it's male or female, if they compare you to other people, that's a huge red flag. Why are they even comparing you to other people? If they
Absolutely.
want you, it's for you. Just like our respected Sheikh told us, our Imam, that's what you get. And I read somewhere, I can't give you the reference. It was from a storybook. I really liked the author. Again, forgive me, it was years ago. I don't remember who, but what stood out in my mind, the point she made. And it was the male character telling the female, do not fall in love with the potential of what I can offer you. Me, right in front of you, that's who you're going to get. And so this is really important too, when it comes to the red flags of potential, not dreaming of what you can mold this person out to be or what they're trying to mold you into, but rather who they are. Of course, we're all on a spiritual development or development journey of growth. Absolutely. We're not talking about that here. We're talking about our essence in terms of if this was a bad boy into drugs, oh, suddenly they're going to change because you are an angel of God. Come to him, and change his way. Mind you, I have heard stories like this where the partner has changed their ways because they've seen something in this person that has inspired them. Absolutely, that exists. But the stark reality here is that you cannot have this expectation of somebody when they are as they are, who they are. That is a red flag. If you expect them to change for you, it's not going to happen. Again, that's the wrong intention. They need to change for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not for you. So again, when it comes to this aspect of mental health, how they make you feel, how they again, when it comes to consistency in this aspect, are they consistently supporting you and helping you reach your full potential? Or are they dragging you down and making you feel really bad about yourself and not encouraging you if you want to pursue your education or your career? How are they going to make you feel with that? Are they going to support you, whether it's both male or females? I've heard this from both. Right? Where the male has perhaps some aspirations as a reciter, perhaps a religious reciter or a speaker, and the wife, the partner, the future wife does not encourage that, or her and her family are not really into that. That could lead into problems later on because they're not very common. So how does that make that male feel? His partner's not supporting him, right? He's not really feeling validated or supported, right? So there's a lot. We can go on and on in terms of the mental health aspects, but you get it in a nutshell. And when we flip it onto the female side, it's common, in terms of continuing their education and career. And when children come along, how are they going to deal with that? So these are things that need to be ironed out ahead of time and spoken about, because if not, when it comes at the moment and just you blindly go into it, that can really impact your well-being and your mental health when you're not supporting each other. It's a surprise. It's a shock. Well, no, these are things that needed to be ironed out ahead of time. You're not going into a haunted house and being surprised here, right? You are actually going into something that you need to study properly and not be surprised. Okay, maybe haunted house was not the right analogy here, but you get what I mean.
It's very October. I think it's good.
No, I don't like referring to those. Let's use the proper one. A maze, perhaps. You're going to a maze blindly, right?
A corn maze.
Yeah. So
corn maze.
So you want to be able to have, you don't know what's going to happen, but at least you work on them ahead of time so you know how to support and lift each other.
That's beautiful. And I was just thinking, there's some things that about someone's character that will withstand time, right? So, I call it core values. There's some things that are essential to somebody that are going to not change. But then there's lots of other change that happens in a relationship. But some of those core things that you're looking for, right? Like somebody's generous with their spirit, or they're generous with you. Not just with money, not just with money, but with their time and with their essence. And, this is why the Prophet ﷺ would move his whole body to focus, right? And in the 5 love languages, Gary Chapman talks about this, but the idea that the Prophet ﷺ made the other person feel seen and wanted and heard, Validated, yes. And that's somebody who's, you know, that generosity, that's going to be something that's key, or that they have respectful speech, that they hold their tongue when they, like Sister Salma was talking about, when they're talking about other people, you know, or they're talking about their own family, or if they're constantly interrupting their family members, you think they're not going to think that, you know, or they can't admit fault. They can't admit fault. They just don't have that self-awareness, like, oh, they're always blaming someone else or gaslighting somebody else. Those are all huge red flags that, you know, something's going on with that personality. But somebody who is self-reflective, somebody who checks the ego, those are core aspects of somebody's value structure. Now, things change. You mentioned something, Berak, really important about the roles changing. And we see this sometimes. Children are born. Things change. Maybe the woman thought that she was going to be a career woman. Now she wants to stay at home, or the other way around. She's at home with the baby and she's like, I can't do this. I have to go back into the workforce. And sometimes that does create a rift. And I just want to remind people here, right before we keep going and talking about this, that if you go to LaunchGood.com/DV, you will help many people who are survivors of maybe a quarrel that went wrong, maybe a sense of control that went out of control and entered to a space of violence. And they now need to rebuild their lives. They need to have the hope. They need to have the support of amazing scholars, of being able to meet with mental health professionals and to be able to afford that. That's where your donations are going to go at LaunchGood.com/DV through the Muslim Aid USA Global Campaign Against Domestic Violence. I want to talk a little bit about those changes that can happen and the changing of those roles. So we know that creates conflict. And I want to know, how can somebody who is in a relationship right now, what can they take to help have the most positive resolution when they meet conflict? What's the best way to navigate conflict? I'll first start with you, Sister Salma.
I mean, I think the first thing is you pause, just pause, and remind yourselves that conflict is normal. It's part of every relationship, and it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to grow. So you have to pause. Some people panic when there's conflict, and they're afraid that they must have made a terrible mistake. The marriage is over if they have any kind of conflict. But conflict is normal, and we know even the Prophet ﷺ had conflict in his marriages, and we have that documented. So it's normal. It can be positive. It can be healthy.
Yes.
Before you run into conflict, I would encourage people to learn how to resolve conflict, you know, like get some basic conflict resolution skills. And, you know, the first step is to recognize that you guys are on the same team. If you're married to each other, you're on the same team. You can't have a winner and a loser. You both win or you both lose. So, but you don't have to agree. You don't have to agree about everything. You don't have to like everything that the other person says, but you do have to try to understand it. Try to understand where they're coming from. There's two perspectives. You know, however many people you have, there's that many perspectives.
Yes.
Pausing, trying to understand, you know, if your spouse is upset about something, they probably have a reason. You might not think it's a good reason, but they have a reason, and you can't evaluate it. You can't evaluate if it's good or bad. Listen first. Listen, you know, with the goal of understanding, and see if you can put yourself in your spouse's shoes, I actually ask people to put themselves in their spouse's skin and try to imagine what it's like in that moment. So now we're building empathy and compassion. Yes. And when we have empathy and compassion, anger kind of dissipates. It goes down. The more that we understand each other, the more that we can empathize, then we realize, okay, my spouse is hurting just like I'm hurting, you know, or my spouse is passionate about something just like I'm passionate about this other thing. And so now we can start building a bridge, okay, and start problem solving. But before we can problem solve, we have to have understanding.
Yes.
And then if we've done the work in advance of identifying our goals and vision for a marriage, then when we're problem solving in line with our goals and our vision.
Right. From that perspective, it's like a joint.
Right. Yeah, so it's not just about my way or your way. It's about what would be a great way to resolve this conflict that helps us get closer to our goals that we talked about in the beginning. But many people haven't talked about that in the beginning, so that's where they get into trouble. So one person's going right and the other person's going left. Okay. Yeah. And they're trying to drag their partner with them. Yeah. And that's never going to work. I mean, that's how you break a marriage or you strain a marriage, right? Yes. So it's really that pause, I think, and not being threatened if somebody has a different perspective than you, right? It's enriching. It can be enriching, right? Now, sometimes your partner could be wrong. That's fine. And sometimes you can be wrong. But until you pause to listen, you're saying, no, you can never be wrong.
I'm joking. No, everything you're saying is right. And it's borne out in the research. John Gottman's research shows 69% of the disagreements between a man and a woman in a relationship are intractable. 69% of the things that you disagree about, they're never going to change. Just, do you respect the disagreement? And can you agree on the other 31? So. Well, thank you so much. I think that humanizing and having a shared vision, humanizing the other person, having a shared vision are really important in keeping on the same team. For you, Imam Magid, when you are, talking to folks and you see them in conflict, and I know you see some people in conflict, what are some of the ways that you tell them, that you advise them to, in a healthy way, come off the ledge and see each other as human beings?
Thank you. I would like to, I think I agree with everything being said before me, especially now, just the last point Salma was making. Conflict comes from misunderstanding of expectations.
Mm-hmm.
Everything in life is based on expectations. Expectation of even relation with God, with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What are you expecting of Allah? And then what you expect of yourself? What you expect from others? Wrong expectation lead to misunderstanding and disappointment, and lead to conflict. But that begins with that. If you want to tell them, okay, they have a fight, you ask them first, what you were expecting in this conflict? What caused this conflict? It's based on, I expect her, for example, when I married her, to cook and to clean and so forth. She's not doing that. And that wrong expectations. Or expectation, I'm expecting him to buy me the last Tesla. If anyone drives Tesla, don't take it personal. And the guy says Honda Civic, that that's what I'm gonna buy you, and at the wrong expectation, creating a conflict, a financial conflict. Even there's a conflict that happened from intimate relationship. People who watch or kind of indecent materials, they create expectations and expect their wife to satisfy the need the way they see it on this haram screen. Therefore, it's all about expectation first. If we have the right expectation, understand expectation, because expectation are the three things. We put that in our book, me and Salma. Either hidden expectation, or external expectation. Expectation come from outside, not coming from you, from the mother-in-law, father-in-law, the friends, and hugga or shisha club. It comes from those places. Or expectations.
I like that.
No, you're absolutely right.
Keep talking. You're right. You're right. The young people, they say group chat approved, which means that they're like chatting with their friends, and getting advice.
Hidden expectation, external expectation not reasonable. You're asking somebody. My wife is from California. I'm from Sudan. Then I want her to wear Sudanese saree. When I had to cook molokhia and kisra, the one my mother used to cook, or my stepmother, and then she would say, what's wrong with you? You should marry the Sudanese lady. Why marry a lady from California? That's completely not reasonable expectation. You cannot marry someone to try to Sudanize them, this kind of thing. That is one of the problem of creating conflict. The other aspect of this is the emotional, psychological dimension of conflict. People don't understand. There's certain things triggers people.
Absolutely.
You say something, it triggers somebody. You behave in a particular way, maybe a person now have flashback. People react to certain things different from others based on where they come from. The psychological and emotional dimension. The other aspect of it is the spiritual dimension of conflict. The spiritual dimension, which is there's arrogance sometimes. I will never admit that I'm wrong. I have to be always right. As Salma was saying, that's who's going to win, who's going to lose. that stems from arrogance. I will never admit my fault, my mistakes, because that will show weaknesses. The assumption that I know better than him and her because I may be born and raised in America and he was born overseas, or maybe I'm a doctor and she is a teacher, and maybe because I have more money, therefore all decision has been made by me. Those I call them causes of conflict. If you don't understand the cause of conflict and deal with symptoms, you will never resolve conflict.
Yeah.
You know that there's earthquake, there's something taking place there, and the building is moving and so forth. People don't realize because there's earthquake taking place.
Right.
Therefore, you have to deal with, in my opinion, understanding the causes first before you try to address the symptoms.
Thank you, Imam Magid. And there are some people who are living in conflict-ridden homes, and this next question is for you, Berak. When someone comes from either a home that where they saw domestic violence happen, or a home where people were abusive to one another, what do you think is the best way for them forward? How do they build a healthier relationship for themselves and choose a different path than maybe the unpeaceful home that they grew up in with their family background?
What our respected Sheikh mentioned is highly important here to understand when coming from such backgrounds is the triggers. You have to understand your own triggers and your partner so you know how to cope and deal with it. And I use these simple examples of understanding, for example, your own response to stress. How do you deal with stress, right? How does your body respond to stress? And this is a really good start to understanding how you respond to other triggers in your life. It could be emotional triggers. It could be past trauma. It could be an actual red flag that you see somewhere that could have reminded you of past sexual childhood trauma where you saw a red flag when the act took place, for example. And they are highly, highly impactful in a negative way. So it's really important to first understand your emotional triggers so that you know how to take care of it. Of course, as a therapist, what am I going to say? Please seek therapy.
Yes.
Work on healing and processing your own trauma before you engage your energy and your aura with somebody else's trauma and their energy, right? And you cannot expect your partner to be your healer, your treatment, so to speak. Yes, we did talk about, working together on that, walking together in that journey towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the beautiful image of marriage that way. But you cannot expect your partner to be your healer or to get rid of that, because I do see a lot of people, and please share as well, my dear elders, that people sometimes find their partner to be their rescuer. If they're leaving a home that has abuse from their brother, their father, or even from their mother, whether you're male or female, and then you fall in love suddenly with somebody who comes as, a knight in
shining armor.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you see a lot of people leave this type of environment, problematic, high conflict home, to a place where they think they're going to find a haven, a safe haven, when in fact what we've seen is quite the opposite. And a lot of young girls, women perhaps, marry early to get out of these situations, accept whoever comes their way just to get away from here, finding themselves in even more difficult circumstances.
Very true.
So it's really important, again, to reiterate, to understand your own triggers. If you have had past trauma, it is common to have these responses. And when you hear something like the Sheikh was saying from your partner, you can be triggered instantly from 0 to 100. We use the analogy of the Chihuahua to the grizzly bear, instantly like that, in terms of danger. And so you want to understand how you respond so you know how to reverse the impact of that. First. Second, please do go through the healing process. And also, if you feel comfortable and you feel safe with your partner, and this is part of the building of trust between couples, is to share that with them. They may not know what you've been through. They may bring a red flag as a gift to you. I'm just using that as an example. And it can trigger you, your anxiety. You might start yelling and screaming. You might go into deep depression. You might have suicide ideation. So it's really important to share this with your partner. And out of respect for each other, not to bring this up, not to do these things that hurt the other person. We know, of course, the people who have the arrogance, like the Sheikh mentioned, will definitely use these triggers to hurt the other person. Or will
Absolutely.
share the secrets of your past, of things perhaps that you don't have a stellar past. And we all come with things that we have done and we've done istighfar for, inshallah. We're looking for openness and a second chance that this partner might use this against you in times of conflict.
Yeah, and as blackmail. It's terrible.
Right. It's a form of mental abuse. Absolutely. So it's really important to understand your triggers, get the proper healing and support, and not turn to your partner as your savior, because in the end, only Allah is going to be your savior. But He also sends you resources, professional resources. Even if your partner is a therapist, by the way, that's still not fair to put that upon them, because it's a lot of heavy energy that they take on throughout the day. Of course, they're going to be more compassionate. Well, at least we hope. I've actually had clients in the past where their partners were therapists. They did not show them the same regard as they did to their clients. It's really important to understand that about yourself and your partner so that you can work through the conflict of the home that you have come from, inshallah.
Thank you. And I just want to,
I'm sorry, could I add something to what Berak was saying? Because I really appreciate what you're saying, Berak, and it made me remember that a lot of people who have come from abusive backgrounds, they feel a lot of shame around that. And they don't actually want to share that with their potential spouse. And so I suggest that in that premarital stage, first of all, I recommend premarital counseling for everyone. But if you come from an abusive background, I really insist. And if I could make it mandatory, I would. But because there's so much shame around it, I actually think that it can be part of a way to screen that potential partner by asking hypothetically, especially if a person has gone through sexual abuse, what do you think about a scenario in which a girl is molested by her grandfather? Or what do you think about a situation where, a boy was, beat up by his dad? So you ask in a hypothetical way, and the person's response can actually be very informative as to whether or not this is a person who could be empathetic or who might look down on you or who might use that as a way, sort of, you've already been abused, so I'm also going to abuse you. Like that, there are some people who are predatory. So I think it's also a myth, sometimes people feel like if I leave that home where I was abused, I'm done with that, like it's in the past. But Berak and Imam Magid, you've been talking about triggers. So I guess I just want to make it explicit that we bring that forward with us. And the fact that we're out of that abusive environment doesn't mean that we're healed from it. And so it's really important to intentionally and explicitly kind of work through it. As Berak was saying, I appreciate that.
And if you go to LaunchGood.com/DV, you will help people who are unable to find those resources to find those resources. If you're the kind of person out there who has healed from a background of domestic violence, or maybe you're someone who's listening and wants to be more empathetic and wants to somehow help but doesn't know how, it's so simple. No gift is too small. No amount of time that you and time and money that you put towards this is insignificant, because people need those resources to be able to heal, to come out of those things that really shattered their lives and made them feel broken, so that they can feel rebuilt up again. I wanted to ask the question of, go ahead, Berak. Yeah.
And most importantly, for those who have children, to break that cycle of abuse and offer them a better future from where they've come from.
Yeah, and a lot of people feel very scared to leave when they have children, and that's kind of a good segue to the question I wanted to ask. And again, if you go to LaunchGood.com/DV, you'll see that those are programs that really help women with children that feel very trapped, that feel very financially dependent on the person, that feel social shame for breaking up and blowing up their families, that are afraid about what's going to come, or are afraid of the legal battles that they have to fight for the custody of their children to get them out of that negative situation. You can help change someone's future who feels incredible fear, who feels pinned and just trapped in a corner. You can get them out of there. And I really hope that you guys out there who are listening can help. I wanted to ask the question, and I will pose it, and whoever wants to answer first, maybe Imam Magid, since we haven't heard from you in a bit. I kind of want to know, when do you know that it's time? You've exhausted all the resources. It feels no longer productive, no longer healthy. How do you know it's time for me to seek a way out of this unhealthy marriage?
First, I would like to begin with the statement that regarding the LaunchGoodcom just asked for. I think that many people don't realize that there's the importance of helping people with a relationship, and getting people out of abusive relationship is equally important than also feeding people.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, people sometimes do not connect charity and giving by improving people's mental health and psychological conditions and getting them out of danger. I just want to say that.
Yes.
Therefore, I want people to really to consider that in helping. One of the biggest problem I think in the Muslim community, in people getting out of relationship, is the divorce is a taboo, and people feel like it's like being stuck in relationship because of social consequences of divorce.
Yes.
And how society looking to the divorced woman. Unfortunately, a divorced man have more chance to get remarried than a divorced woman
Yes.
in our Muslim community. Maybe that's in general, actually, in even larger society. I don't know.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
true.
Yes.
Therefore, that is shame, and people, asking why she got divorced, and people always think that something went wrong from the woman.
Yes.
That's why she got divorced. And sometimes the question is, what did you do to deserve to be hidden? Being physically being abused. And it took me forever to finish this article that I promised Sister Salma with. Is why women being asked the questions, and for me, it's very interesting. There's a verse in the Quran where God Almighty said He will ask the female young girl why her life was taken.
While she was buried alive.
Yes, why she was buried alive. To shame the person have done wrong to her publicly. Before they punish them, before God punished them, He asked the question. He didn't ask her that how you deserve it. What did you do to deserve this? Right. So to justify it, He asked the question publicly to shame the person. Therefore, my issue here, my advice to people: if the relationship putting you down spiritually, if impact you emotionally, psychologically, physically, make you sick in your stomach, make you don't like to be in that home, feel unsafe, people like walking on eggshells, you're scared when the person come in, exit as soon as possible.
Yes.
And you get reward by God Almighty for exiting. You get the reward for exit because you're looking for your well-being. And God have honored you, dignified you. He doesn't want you to feel like captive. Prisons. Marriage is not a prison. It is meant to improve a person's social, emotional, psychological, physical condition by having a partner. If they do the opposite, you get out of it with no hesitation. Don't think God Allah will be unhappy with you. And people quote in this hadith that the most hated things halal in the eyes of God is divorce, and therefore people not getting divorced. Let me tell you what. The Rasul get divorced. Let me tell you what. Companions get divorced. It is not something that you should feel shame of it. And therefore we should tell people, if the relationship become difficult, then get out of it.
Thank you so much, Imam Magid, for the powerful message. Berak, do you have just a quick response to that? When do you know that it's time to exit?
When we look at it from an abusive stance, and I'm just speaking to that specifically, one time is too many times. Sometimes you have couples where, I'm talking about physical here, right? So sometimes it could be in the moment of anger, and I've heard stories of people making that mistakes and never doing it again. But again, it's with the consistency and the situation, and it's not a cookie cutter formula. Every situation is different. But when, like our respected Sheikh mentioned, that you don't feel safe, you are unhappy, there is no room for growth for you, your children, then you are in a prison, and you are not going to grow and develop. And it's so important that within our communities that we have to work together to make it safe for women to leave.
Mm-hmm.
We have heard stories, and just a year and a half ago, we had here in Toronto a woman with 4 children leaving her physically and mentally abusive husband, and she could not survive on her own financially, did not have the support of the community. She went back to him. He killed her and the kids. This happens. We don't want to create this kind of environment for people in our communities. We have to be supportive, just like somebody who breaks an arm or a leg or gives birth. We rush to the hospital, we rush into their homes, cook for them, support them, ask about them, pick up the phone, do anything we can to support them. Same thing when it comes down to women who are leaving abusive households. We need to support them and not shame them. There is no shame. It takes incredible courage for these women. And men, by the way, because there are men who are also in abusive marriages. It just looks differently. But I have had cases where men have been in abusive relationships, and there's even more shame involved because of the gender variances here. We need to create a safe space for people who are vulnerable in our community, just the way the Prophet did back in the day. He created that atmosphere for the vulnerable people to get the support, to reach out to him and get that support. And we need to recreate that model here. And alhamdulillah, with these types of campaigns, we are slowly getting the word out there at the global level for people not to feel shamed anymore. But you can't just say, don't feel shamed. We have to work on that, the stigma and the stereotypes around that, and making people feel safe. And like I said, when it comes to the physical abuse, one time is too many times. When it comes to the sexual abuse, when it comes to the mental and the psychological, when you have exhausted everything to try and change the situation, get support, ask that person to go to counseling and they're not, and you see how it's making you feel and your children, whether you're male or female, it's time to leave.
Thank you so much, Berak. And just to echo both of our amazing speakers talking about creating a safe space, LaunchGoodcom/DV is a way that you can help. You are powerful enough to create that space. We have to do it together. We have to make sure that nobody goes home to a situation where they could be facing their death because they don't know how to survive outside of that relationship that oppresses them in its very nature. I will give you the last word, Salma, and you can, of course, talk. I'd love to hear from your perspective when you need to exit, but you can also talk about whatever your final thoughts are. I'll give you the floor.
Thank you, Yasmin. As I was listening, I was just thinking that one thing we didn't really talk about that might be useful is a distinction between conflict and abuse. Yes. Because I think it's confusing for a lot of people. And so every relationship has conflict, and conflict simply means a difference of opinion and a difference in perspective and a difference of views. Abuse is not, it's not the kind of normal, healthy conflict that nobody should be subjected to being abused, and no one should abuse another person. So abuse is completely unacceptable. And how do you know the difference, right? So, because for some people who grew up in households where everyone is a conflict avoider, so they don't even know what conflict feels like, or if they've grown up in an abusive household, then that feels like that's what conflict is. Anything short of being punched in the face doesn't feel abusive because that's what you've been through. So it's really important, for people who maybe aren't clear, please do some extra research and reading and consult. But just in short, if we have a difference of opinion and it's conflict there, each person respects the other and respects the other's perspective. Even if we disagree, to the day we die, we may disagree, that color is ugly. No, that color is beautiful. That's fine. We don't have to agree. but we're going to respect each other. We're not going to insult each other, humiliate, threaten, throw objects at each other, or, you know, in any way harm the other person.
Right.
We're not going to intimidate each other. Abuse, on the other hand, you know, yes, there are those obvious signs like physical abuse, you know, where there's bruises and broken bones, but abuse can also be really subtle, where, you know, I think Yasmin, you mentioned gaslighting, you know, where you're made to feel like your opinion and your perspective doesn't matter, that you are trivial and your thoughts are trivial, that you are stupid, that you know nothing. And so it may not be that you're being beaten up, but you're being demeaned and insulted and humiliated. That's not normal conflict. That kind of engagement never leads to anything positive. It only leads to destruction. So I guess I wanted to take a couple of minutes just to really clarify. So when people are asking, when should I leave? And I wholeheartedly agree, you know, with Imam, Magid, and Berak, you know, when it's abuse, if you can get out safely and no further repercussions, sure, do it, get out. But there are people who are so panicked by conflict, normal conflict, healthy conflict. They don't try to learn how to resolve that conflict. They just flee. And so that kind of marriage where there's no abuse, there's no intimidation, there's no manipulation. It's just, we don't know how to actually work through a disagreement. Get help. You can get counseling, you can read self-help books, you can look up on YouTube how to resolve conflict. There's really no excuse for not learning how to do that. You can read Men Are From Mars. I'll just go ahead and plug our book also, Before You Tie the Knot.
Before You Tie the Knot.
There are lots of good books out there. Alhamdulillah, there's no shortage, which means there's no excuse, right? There's Fighting for Your Marriage. There's quite a lot of good books. So find something that resonates with you, but do know the difference between healthy, normal conflict and abuse. They're not the same. And actually, you know, it kind of can be on a spectrum. And if you're not sure, consult a professional and figure it out.
Thank you so much, Salma. And it is important to make that distinction, because I think a lot of people don't sometimes they'll also think like, how could this woman who's been abused, been hit, stay in that marriage? And it's like, before he ever hit her, he completely degraded everything about trusting herself. She can't even trust herself anymore because she's relinquished that control to somebody else through a process of isolation, through a process of demeaning, through a process of making her uneasy about trusting her own voice. So thank you so much. It's a slippery slope. That's exactly, Berak. I want to thank my illustrious guests. You guys are incredible. Please check out the wonderful books that they all recommended. Berak Hussain spoke about Gary Chapman's fantastic book, The 5 Love Languages, as well as Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. I'm so sorry. And then Salma Abugideiri and Mohamed Magid have an incredible book called Before You Tie the Knot. It's important. It's got 100 questions in there. It's got a lot of other really important information about knowing this distinction, how do we resolve conflict, and how do I speak about myself in a way that I actually get to know the person in front of me. So check it out. Barakallahu feekum. Yes, Berak.
Can I please get an autograph book so I can use it with my clients? What do
you guys think? Will you autograph and send her a book?
I want a book, please.
Yeah. Mohamed gave you one of these. Yes.
Always looking at the resources we have in our own communities and supporting each other and making aware of what we have. Absolutely.
That resource is like a gem, and you guys are all gems. And I want everyone out there who's watching, if you've watched this long, thank you. And please just don't leave tonight. This is the end of this 4-part series. How brave Muslim Aid USA was to combine all these amazing minds to do this first ever global Muslim campaign to end domestic violence. Please support this organization and support the women and children and the men that need you. Show them a better way. You can, you have the power. You can do that, and you can help rebuild somebody's life. LaunchGoodcom/DV. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
Have a great night. Bye.